Hey, the SNTIC released very quietly its agenda for Thursday's meeting on the 15th of September, and it finally has stadium recommendations for possible action for the first time in this entire process, which is an obvious signal that they're ready to wrap this up. But the revelation that Sheldon Adelson intends to own part of the Raiders is a complete game changer. That changes the entire picture here. I always figured that Mr. Adelson was using Mark Davis as a kind of a Trojan horse to enter into NFL ownership, in the NFL ownership ranks. He's not going to make it. It's just not happening. I can tell you that right off the bat. But that's another discussion for another vlog. I want to emphasize here that a number of people have said that the Raiders are only putting in $500 million in their right, and that Las Vegas Sands is $650 million, and that they're not getting much out of this at all. Actually, that's not true, because the one factor, revenue factor, that has not been discussed and analyzed is naming rights values. Now, naming rights are tricky to estimate in this instance, but I'm going to just basically ballpark it, and I'll give you the reasons why and say that the naming rights for that building that they're planning, if they get to a point of even getting approved by the NFL, which I cannot see, would be about $250 million. Now, that's the significance of that $250 million is that it's roughly about slightly less than what I calculated the Oakland Raiders and Las Vegas Sands, now Sheldon Adelson, since their people were saying, well, Las Vegas Sands really isn't putting up the money, but they are managing the negotiations and the process in the form of Andy Aboud and his deputies. But the bottom line is that that $250 million is roughly equal, for all practical purposes, to the tax increment revenue they would have gotten. That's why it's very easy for them to just say, hey, you know what? You can keep the revenue that we would normally have taken from tax increment, and we'll walk, and we'll make it even more of a gift to you. What the negotiators are really doing, and that's got to be Mark Badain's call. They had to have come from Mark Badain and then communicated to Sheldon Adelson and Las Vegas Sands, because they don't have enough knowledge about stadium financing to think that way. That had to come from Badain and the Raiders president. And he rightly observed that the SNTIC has not focused almost at all on naming rights. It's mentioned, but a significant discussion of naming rights revenue has never been a part of SNTIC conversation at all. At all. The way the SNTIC board is being led down the path is just, if it wasn't real, it would be laughable. But because it's real, it's sad. They really don't understand what they're doing, or how they're being used, or how they're being misled. The simple fact of the matter is, naming rights and sponsorship revenues should be put into the rate of return calculation for both the Raiders and Las Vegas Sands, Sheldon Adelson, since Mr. Adelson says he intends to be part of the owner of the Raiders. That opened an enormous door, because now you cannot analyze the return on investment only for off-stadium development. You have to include everything, and that includes the stadium, and that includes the sponsorship revenues and the naming rights revenues it's going to generate, which in total, I estimate, just ballpark from my experience, to be about $350 million, perhaps $400 million. That's $250 million for naming rights, and then an additional $100 to $150 million for various types of in-stadium sponsorships, from porridge to facilities like restaurants to bars. Just about anything that one can think of to brand in a stadium has to be thought of as part of the total calculation for revenue for the stadium over there. I've certainly done it with, in fact, I did it with respect to the stadium plan that Mark Davis asked me to come up with last year for the Raiders in Oakland. The bottom line is that, oh, and by the way, we also have to remember luxury box revenues. And the luxury box revenues in their instance is about, will come out to be about $300 to $500 million. In my configuration with 300 luxury boxes, I had total revenue for the Raiders from luxury boxes alone at $1.8 billion. $1.8 billion, about 40% of which we use for construction. Okay, you can also use naming rights revenue for construction. It's money. There's no rule that says you have to use it for this or that. It's money that you are gathering that can be used for construction or player development or what have you. The bottom line is the SNTIC has not done a good job of including these revenue figures. In fact, when I mentioned this in the past to people who are working on it, they claim it's noted, but again, there's no breakout of a spreadsheet of how those revenues impact, for example, rates of return to the developer, or an offset to what the developer claims it's losing. Okay? That's a big deal. So no one can say that this is an altruistic deal and that Adelson and Las Vegas Sands isn't going to make a lot of money off of it. If you actually believe that, you're a fool. You are a total fool. These folks are not playing for keeps. Okay? They're serious. They're really serious. And they're intent on fooling the public, and the public in Nevada is going right along with it, at least so far.